Austin, what's up, man?
Hey man, how you doing today?
I am doing well, sir. It's great to finally have you on the podcast. I know that we have interacted several times at various Texas cannabis events. You, of course, are, one of the major players within the Texas cannabis space. So thanks for making time for me in the audience today, man. Really excited to talk with you.
Of course, yeah, I appreciate the kind words. I'm just glad that we didn't get swept away with all this rain yesterday.
How crazy is that, man? Like, we're hitting national news. So for those listening, and this is going to air later, but it's August 23rd, second day really where DFW area just has had rain nonstop. And before that, Austin, you can attest to this. It's been a drought this summer. I mean, it's been so dry, right?
Yeah, it's almost 2.5 months since we got rain, like significant rain here in Fort Worth. And I think they said we were down about 10 inches throughout the year, and we got it all in about a 12-hour span.
if 2022 couldn't get any weirder, right? It's like
Yeah,
the
for sure.
weather factor. How was Fort Worth? Were you guys like flooding it all? I mean, I know Dallas was kind of hit hard.
There were some parts that the water got high, definitely near the Trinity, but it wasn't what you saw in Dallas, because there are several different highways that are built down, like I-30 and I-35 right outside of downtown is built down
Oh,
on an incline. Same with parts of Loop 12 and the 635, the expressway on 635 is literally underground. And so there was a lot of bad flooding in Dallas. Just urban areas can't take that kind of, immediate rain.
yeah. I didn't think about that, man. That makes so much sense. And when I first moved out to Dallas, I'd always hear like, the engineering and the way in which they constructed the highways like wasn't very optimal, like to get into Dallas. And so now that you say that, and that makes sense, 635, there is that whole other section that's like below, right? Like the
Yeah.
freeway. So if they're not draining any of that water coming in, that could be a huge problem, like moving forward, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, the infrastructure in Dallas is it's like it always continually needs to be updated, because Dallas just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I don't know the last time you drove into downtown during rush hour traffic where 30 and 35 and 45 all kind of like mix and mingle right there.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare just on a regular day. You can imagine, pouring rain, feet of rain.
Right, right. Well, hey, I'm glad to hear at least that you're safe, and Fort Worth wasn't as impacted as much as Dallas. And thoughts and prayers for those who were affected, because that was not easy these past 2 days. So
No, not
uh
at all.
no. Well, Austin, we're here today to have you on as the executive director of the Texas Cannabis Collective. For those that are not aware of the Texas Cannabis Collective, it's a nonprofit that's focused on breaking news, advocacy, community events, all within the Texas cannabis space. And as I mentioned when we first kicked this off, you're very, very involved within the Texas cannabis space. So before we jump into the theme of this conversation, and I've kind of dubbed it showing up for cannabis activism and advocacy work, which I know you do, and you're a big proponent of doing that. Let's first get a sense of your background, because I don't know much about it, man. I know that obviously you grew up in Texas, but where did the passion for cannabis come from? What's your relationship with the plant, and what brought you to where you're at today?
Oh man, it's been a long journey, I guess. I grew up. I turned 40 this year, but I've grown up here in North Texas, lived here my whole life, and I've been an avid cannabis user since I would say I was 18, 19, so 2000, 2001. I really started getting involved, learning about the plant. And back then, we were just getting medical marijuana established in places like California and in Oregon and different places in the West Coast. So this idea of medical marijuana was still a very, very new concept. And so I got involved and, started learning as much as I could about the plant.
Were you shocked at first? Were you like medicinal cannabis, like from being just like a recreational user, like back in the day?
Yeah, of course. The only time I had ever really used it, especially at that age, was to have a good time, right?
Right.
Yeah, it was kind of shocking to learn that it was helping people with like multiple sclerosis to stop the tremors, and people with epilepsy were using it to stop seizures. And I had heard that people were using it, RSO, high concentrated THC oil, to fight cancer. And when back then, when you were trying to tell people, oh man, this could help you with cancer, they were just like, oh, you're a crazy stoner, you've been smoking too much, you don't know what you're talking about. That was the perception. And so let's fast forward 10 years. We've had 10 years of medical marijuana in the country. And I continue to use cannabis the whole time. In 2010, I was arrested in Grapevine, Texas for under a gram of cannabis. It was really some seeds and sticks that they found in my car. And so I had to go through the whole criminal justice process in Texas. I got to learn a lot about cannabis and how people are being persecuted for it and prosecuted for it. And so I got to go through that whole experience. I really got to learn the whole history. I got to spend time behind bars for 5 days in Tarrant County.
5 days at the time. Has that changed? I mean, so you said, less than a gram of flour. That's pretty harsh. Is that how it is today?
Well, so back in 2010, so I spent 1 day in Grapevine, and then I had to go through the process. They kind of wanted to set me up through a pre-trial diversion program. I had kind of a sketchy lawyer. That's the first thing that I would always recommend people is if you ever get in any legal trouble, you get what you pay for a lawyer, and make sure you get a good one, because my issue kind of got messed up on some paperwork. And long story short, the judge held me in contempt of court for saying that I took the diversion trial program, but didn't. And so I ended up spending 4 days in county, again, just for like some seeds and some sticks. And nowadays here in Tarrant County, it really depends on what county you're in. But in Tarrant County, there's the accepted pretrial diversion program for misdemeanor amounts of marijuana possession. And a lot of people, they just do that. They take it's like 2 clean UAs. So you got to stop smoking or consuming cannabis. You got to take a drug awareness class, and it usually involves some kind of community service, like 10 hours of community service or something stupid like that.
Right.
But so things have gotten a little bit better, but they are definitely still arresting people in Tarrant County, in the city of Fort Worth, for low-level marijuana possession. The state statistics back that up. This is still really happening all across the state, even in very progressive areas like Houston or San Antonio. The only place that's really stopped is the city of Austin. And that's because of their their ballot initiative to really eliminate arrests for misdemeanor marijuana possession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know that, you're heavily involved in this huge effort to decriminalize across the state. And we'll definitely get into that, because I think that there are specifically 5 Texas cities that are going to be voting on decriminalizing cannabis here coming up soon. Before we do that, though, so a lot of what you said is interesting. And I know that especially when it comes to like concentrates and vapes, like Texas does not fuck around, right? Like it's a felony. I mean, you're in big trouble if you're stopped with any type of concentrate or oil. Is that right?
So yeah, every situation is a little different, but really even one, crumb from a marijuana cookie is technically considered a felony, and any amount of THC concentrate, Delta 9 greater, and I have to define it because this is how the state defines what marijuana is. is any cannabis product that is in greater concentration of than 0.3% Delta 9 THC by dry weight. So we've got a very convoluted definition, state definition and federal definition of what marijuana is. We've always known it as the chemical component in Delta 9 THC that gets you high, right? Like
Right.
that's what we've, in layman's terms, that's what that is. That's just how the state has defined it. And, it's, we had some movement. We had a bill that was going to make up to 2 ounces of concentrate, a Class B misdemeanor, which in most counties across the state, really at least the heavily populated counties across the state, that Class B misdemeanor could have gotten kicked up to a Class C, depending on the city structure or how they enforce their local laws. So we could have had a lot of change and reform. Unfortunately, the Senate and the lieutenant governor had other ideas. And so, when that law was coming out, it almost got voted out, but then it got a D8, a banning of Delta 8 THC amendment was added on to it. That kind of stalled it out, and the legislature ended before that bill passed. So still currently, any possession of any concentrate of Delta 9 THC is a felony if you are not part of the Texas Compassionate Use Program. I would also add, if you have a hemp-derived product still in the packaging, then that is technically legal as well. The twisted part about that, Kevin, you've seen Delta 9, gummies and right, edibles starting to like go everywhere, right?
Right.
Those consumables are legit. If they're hemp derived, they've got their proper COAs. They're legit products. The only problem is that the minute you take it out of the package and you throw away the package, this legal hemp product of Delta 9, hemp derived Delta 9 is an automatic felony in the state of Texas. Right? So really, we've pushed a lot of this onto the consumer, and now the consumer bears all the ethical responsibility of handling this product. And it's up to law enforcement based on 254 different counties throughout the state to identify whether that is real or whether it's not real, and oftentimes that comes down to charges and having to get a lawyer to litigate the case. So
that is fascinating. And I gotta pause you because hearing you say that, because I didn't know that level of detail and how that's put on the consumer, right? After it's how you explained it, after that edible or the consumable comes out of the package, right? Even if it's hemp derived. And what blows my mind is this. I've been under the impression that Texas elected officials, it's obviously a red state, but I just was under the impression that there was this sense of like non-education around cannabis and that they needed to be educated because ultimately these are business men and women who like to make money. I mean, Texas is one of the seventh GDP, I think, in the world or something globally, like that. Yeah, globally, right? So I was like, look, it's just going to take some time for these elected officials to understand it. And once they see money that New Mexico is making, where all these Texans are going to purchase the product there, maybe they'll wake up, right? But then I was at that recent Texas Cannabis Roundup event where I saw you there. And, Lisa Pittman, shout out to Lisa, big time lawyer in Texas, related, in the cannabis space. And she says that these elected officials, the state of Texas has so much money that that's not an option. It's not money's not the issue, yeah, right? It's just that they hate cannabis. They don't understand it. And maybe it's religious views or whatever. But my whole point of saying all this is that they have taken such an aggressive stance against cannabis that your example of how the consumer is now taking those, ethical and legal responsibilities on, that's crazy. And not only that, but the recent smokable hemp ban. I mean, that is a direct legislative bill to hurt Texas farmers. I don't care what anybody says, because I mean, go ahead and explain what the Texas smokable hemp ban is for those that don't know about it.
So when back in 2019, during that legislative session, I think it was the 86th legislature, HB 1325 was passed, which was a bill submitted by Rep. King. And it was a bill that effectively put the Texas hemp laws in line with federal hemp laws. Because in 2018, a federal farm bill was passed that effectively legalized hemp in the production of hemp. And so Texas passed 1325. It really moved pretty swiftly through the House, moved over swiftly to the Senate. But when it got to the Senate side, a smokable hemp ban or a consumables ban, I'm sorry, no, just the smokable hemp, but like combustible. They that's how they kind of defined it. You can't combust it. And so that was put in on the Senate side. We can speculate as to who put that in. I have, if history tells us, we know who put that language into the bill. But that came out, it passed, and ever since, when they tried to enforce that, when it came out September 1st of 2019, it immediately went into litigation and had been really in suspension, or it held with an injunction. I try not to use too many lawyery terms because I'm not a lawyer, so I always try to think layman terms.
You sound official though, man. It's all good. Yeah.
Well, it was held in an injunction for all 2 years and just continued to proceed to litigation, went all the way up to the Supreme Court of Texas. And what came out the other side finally 3 years later here in 2022 was a ban on the manufacturing of smokable hemp products in the state of Texas. Not the possession or the selling of. You can sell those all day long. They just can't be made in Texas. They can literally be made in 49 other states and however many hundreds of countries and imported back into the state of Texas. And
insane.
Hearing the state argue the reasoning behind this, it's maddening.
What'd they say? I'm so curious. What'd they say?
That we're the state of Texas and we can do this. They didn't need any solid reasoning. They just, science wasn't going to persuade DHHS, and it's the state really can act with impunity if it so decides to. And I think that's really the bigger problem, is that you're right. We have overwhelming support. But when I say overwhelming, I mean like bipartisan, overwhelming support for cannabis reform, changing these antiquated, outdated laws, and kind of aligning with a lot of the rest of the country. Unfortunately, there is a lot of old money, I would say, that is threatened by the new money that a burgeoning cannabis industry would bring in. And so there is the law enforcement aspect of it as well. And you have to understand that you make something illegal for, in some parts of Texas, over 100 years, just because you make something, a part of the plant legal, or really most of the plant legal in 2019, that everything just switches like that. So we're still battling a lot of stigma, a lot of a lot of change, a lot of I hate to say fake news, because there's some valid talking points, but really a lot of misinformation that some of these legislators like to pull from places like Colorado or Washington State or California.
And I would imagine if I was a betting man, some of those counter arguments would be safety of children, driving under the influence, packaging to kids, right? Like, which are all valid, but
one of the ones that they like to talk about is homelessness, that it brings a lot of homeless people.
Hilarious. What?
Which I was like, look, marijuana is not legal in Texas by any form or fashion, but that hasn't stopped a huge homeless community in
Right.
Austin, or
Right.
if you go to South Dallas, you know what I'm saying?
Tent
There's,
City. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so that is not an effective argument, in my opinion, just because, that kind of stuff exists everywhere in just about every major urban area in the country.
Yeah, that's a huge problem that the United States is facing. Not, that's not
Right.
specific to just the Texas problem. Yeah, for sure.
Right. It's definitely not cannabis for sure.
No, no, but they'll find any way to blame cannabis. I think I saw, who was it? Laura Ingraham from Fox News or something, blaming like the student, the student who shot up Uvalde, I think. They were saying that, because he dabbed or because he consumed cannabis, that was the primary reason. And I'm sitting to myself going, okay, wait a second here. These lies are getting out of control at this point, because like I thought that the common understanding of cannabis was, hey, it chills you out, it mellows you, it makes you hungry, you laugh, I don't really know many people. I honestly don't know anyone who has consumed where they've just wanted to go on a terror and a rage. That's just something that
I will say that everybody has an endogenous cannabinoid system, right? I'm sure you've talked about the ECS many times on your podcast.
Yep.
And everybody responds differently to cannabis, and there are situations out there that people with severe mental health issues like schizophrenia.
Yep.
Right, the wrong cannabis strain could exacerbate those symptoms. So some of these claims are not without merit, but require just an enormous amount of context.
Sure.
Before we just start saying marijuana makes you crazy and makes you want to shoot people.
Right.
I think that we need to talk about, some of these issues, because cannabis. When I say marijuana, I try to use it interchangeably. Cannabis is not for everybody. There are people that suffer from something called cannabis hyperemesis syndrome.
I know people. I know two people that deal with that. Yeah, personally. And
right. And
hot showers, hot tubs, like they when they smoke, they vomit excessively. Yeah, it's a real thing. There are adverse effects with cannabis, no doubt. It's an external substance. I have issue when it's so cut, black and white. Like, oh, this is the reason why, with, like you said, no context, no, because that's not helping the movement at all, because there is so much good that this plant presents, right? So like, why delay and suffocate that good when, we have more to learn, basically.
Right. You mentioned Laura Ingraham. I think it was on Tucker Carlson too. Some of these guys are just shock value.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And just kind of throw things from the hip. And it's just not as easy to take, that situation using cannabis and then directly going to the shooting, say A to B. That's it. It's not that simple. I think we can all agree when we look into the Uvalde situation, there are a plethora of issues that set that situation into effect. And could cannabis have been a culprit? It potentially, but there's no way that you could definitively say that was the reason why this guy went and shot up. I would suggest that if you looked at the family history and just like the general mindset of this kid, prior to the event, you would have seen a lot more red flags than cannabis.
Right.
So,
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, nothing usually is that simple. I mean, there's usually more to it. Right. Right. Well, let's talk specifically about Texas cannabis politics. I as I mentioned earlier, you're on the front lines. I mean, you show up, right, for cannabis activism, for advocacy work. So I guess to start this part of the conversation, just give us the landscape of Texas cannabis politics, what your experience has been interacting with these elected officials. And then I guess a second part of this question is what, recent efforts have you been engaged with? You can speak about the decriminalization efforts if you'd like, but yeah.
Sure. So I've been going to the legislature, back in 2015, Colorado and Washington State legalized adult use, recreational use, marijuana, whatever you want to call it, in 2012. And then we began to see these markets actually take hold in late 2013 into 2014. So in 2015, I went to Colorado, me and my wife, and man, fell in love, went to my first dispensary, fell in love, was like, oh my God, I want to do this. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I could stand behind the counter and sell people weed all day long. And I remember at the time thinking, man, how hard is it to change the marijuana laws in Texas? It should be easy, right?
Right.
Well, here I am.
7 years later.
And it's proven difficult because our system of government is very different than most states. A lot of the states that were able to change their cannabis laws did so through a ballot initiative via statewide vote, right? So citizens, for instance, in Oklahoma, were able to draft 788, get the required signatures, put it on the ballot, and in 2018, Oklahomans overwhelmingly, with 57%, passed Question 788, which legalized, I would say, the most progressive medical marijuana program in the country, hands down. And so that's how most states went about it. Unfortunately, Texas does not have a statewide ballot initiative, is against our state constitution. The only way that we can change drug laws in the state are through our elected representatives, through the legislature, and signed off by the governor. So we're already kind of at a disadvantage there. Not to mention our state legislature meets once every 2 years for approximately 140 days. And in that 140 days, I would say they effectively only get work done in about 100 of them. So, you take something like the state of Texas, which, like we alluded to earlier, would be the 7th biggest global economy. And they got to get everything done legislatively within about 4 months.
It's crazy.
Every 2 years. Right. So you can imagine how something like, cannabis reform might take the back seat to, I don't know, energy infrastructure, or, just any host of different agenda items that the state might be facing in a 2-year span. So, and then if you want to say that, give you the triple whammy, of course, our state legislature is incredibly conservative. And when I say incredibly conservative, I mean, super, super conservative. And just in those super conservative areas of Texas, cannabis is still the devil's lettuce. It's a bunch of stoner hippies that are, lazy and no good and that kind of thing. And you'll never convince them. You'll never convince them otherwise. Slowly it's changing. But, that's why things, I think, in Texas have taken a lot longer than several other states. So, that's kind of been my experience in the legislature. You can encourage as much as you want to. You can encourage people to go vote for somebody who says they're going to legalize cannabis. But in my experience, that's something that isn't going to just rush people to the polls, right? Like, most people in Texas are not a single issue voter. But I do think that things are starting to get close. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And cannabis could, in this next election cycle, could be that one tipping issue that could affect an election or two. I hate to say that. We as an organization are prepared to engage either way, right? It doesn't matter for us. It doesn't matter who comes out of the legislature. We're going to envision the worst possible scenario and try to work with what we have, because, to be honest with you, that's what we've been working with for the last, 8, 10, 12 years. People have been fighting for this issue. So that's what we're working with at the state level, and that might hopefully answer some questions to a lot of people. You know, what's taking so long in Texas? It's our form of government, to be honest with you. As far as things at the local level, we have been engaged in several decriminalization campaigns. Ground Game Texas, which is a progressive group, really started with an initiative in Austin and really brought the idea that, well, we can't change things at the state level. We're not going to wait every 2 years to try to come tackle this at the state, and the state just keeps saying no. We're going to try to take this into our own hands and do this at the local level. And so there are ballot initiatives, believe it or not, at the local level. And cannabis reform, as far as decriminalization or the prioritization of enforcement on cannabis, can be done at the local level. And so the city of Austin, Ground Game, was able to gather support and get the signatures. I think it was something like 40,000 signatures in the city of Austin.
Wow.
And put it on a local ballot initiative, which was done last May. And it passed with 80, 85, 86%, something like that.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, I'm not surprised it being Austin, but still, even if you look at like greater Texas, I think I said at the beginning, 60% of Texans support some type of cannabis legalization or reform, right? Whether it's medicinal
Absolutely.
or what have you. Yeah.
Yeah. In Austin, to be honest with you, while we tend to think Austin, okay, it's one of the most liberal areas in the state of Texas, there's still just a lot of conservative people in Travis County, in the city of Austin, and in surrounding areas of Austin. 85%. Yeah, I guarantee you, 85% of Austin is not all Democrat. Okay, right. It takes a lot of Republicans to vote to get 85%. To get that kind of majority, you need both sides, right? Yeah. And so this is an issue that we know is popular across the state, across all party lines, across all racial components. We know that. We have the campaign in Denton, and San Marcos and Killeen. So those are the three big other cities. I know Elgin and Harker Heights are added onto those. Those are some smaller little municipalities outside of these areas. But we've been working in Denton and San Marcos since like 2018, 2019, working to get work done at city council. Not to even mess with the ballot initiative. So when Ground Game came with this ballot initiative measure, our allies at Mano Amiga and San Marcos and our allies at Decrim Denton and Denton jumped on that, and we also were bringing ancillary support, whether it was financially, whether it was boots on the ground, whether it was media production, content, distribution. Any way we could help with these initiatives, we wanted to make sure that we were doing that work, because again, we can't wait another 2 years or even another 6 months, to be honest with you, until the legislature convenes. And we don't even know if we get the same cast of characters back. We may go another 4 years of very, very small incremental changes to our cannabis policy and virtually no changes to penalty reductions. So we're engaged in Denton. We were able to get the signatures verified and counted with the city of Denton. So that was put on the November 8th ballot. Same for San Marcos, same for Killeen, same for Elgin, same for Harker Heights. It doesn't matter if it was big community, small community, city of Austin, city of Denton. Overwhelmingly, we were able to get support and get these issues put on the election ballot. And in November, we're going to get a much clearer idea of how successful are these going to be 85%? No, they might be closer to like 55 to 60%. But we believe that every single one of these are going to pass. And if they do, that's going to be quite the indictment on the state, and that we have a lot of evidence to show the state, again, no matter who comes into power, that this is a winning issue. This is an issue that most Texans support. And it's something that we need to get, that we almost got done in 2021. It's something that needs to get done in 2023.
Man, I love that. I got to tell you, I mean, hats off to Ground Game and Decrim Denton and all those, activist groups for taking the initiative and saying, you know what, we're not going to wait. We're not going to wait for the next legislative session where we know that cannabis will probably not be prioritized. There's other issues that they need to address in that 2 year time when they do meet. So to go to the local municipality, the local level and say, hey, like let's look at the ballot measure. Let's talk to these local municipalities and see how we can move the needle. Because you're right. I mean, if we have a total of 5 cities at the end of November that have voted, right, regardless if it's 85, 86% or not, as long as it's a majority, there's an appetite, and that's great. And that's only going to be good data to show at the state level to say, like, to your point, this is a winning issue. This is something that the people want. Let's move on it, And one last thing that I'll say, it just speaks to the overall Texas cannabis slash hemp community. Like, I know I'm not as heavily involved as y'all are in the group and that I see when I go to some of these networking events throughout Texas, but I do watch, online. I see what you guys, I mean, I had, let me just give you this. One guy that I met at the Texas Cannabis Roundup moved from California, and he said, I have never seen a state assemble a group of people that are so passionate about one issue to where they're really like taking it upon themselves to drive change. And that
Mhm.
was what excited him. And he actually moved from California to Texas. Obviously, kind of this is more up and coming, right? California has its own set of problems after legalizing with taxes and so on. But
The
he was,
worst.
it's the worst. Yeah. But he was just so impressed, man, with the Texas community. So, I mean, do you want to speak on that a little bit and just some of the usual suspects that you're interacting with on a daily basis?
Oh man. So I would say that not only does Texas have a very core group of cannabis entrepreneurs, enthusiasts, stakeholders, whatever term you want to use, the community in Texas itself is very vibrant, very strong. The network is continually growing. It's strengthening. It used to be back in the day, there was one nonprofit organization in the state that was dedicated to reforming cannabis laws, right? It was Texas Normal.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's Texas Normal, there's the Texas Cannabis Collective, there's Texas Hemp Coalition, there's the Texas Hemp Federation, there's so many different organizations now involved, in so many people across the state. I would say that even now, because Texas is so big, that now you have pockets of culture and community, whether you're in Houston or San Antonio or Austin or Dallas Fort Worth or El Paso. I mean, you have these own little communities that have a very vibrant cannabis scene. And, our goal is to really just connect all of these people and keep them, hungry for this change, because it's going to be a continued fight. I I will say this, that I fear that if we do get the same cast of characters coming back, uh, that means Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, Kim Paxton, Glenn Hager. If we get all of the executives coming back, then I fear a lot of changes coming for the cannabinoid sector of hemp. Um, this is historically in the past, they tried to come after D8 two or three different times in the 2021 legislature. Depending on what kind of federal farm bill, the final language that we see in the 23 farm bill, we could see them continue to come after cannabinoids. They've proven that they are willing to regress on the issue via the smokable hemp ban, which we discussed earlier. They've proven that they will go after cannabinoids. And I would just caution everybody that if all of these guys come back, there's a very strong chance that in 2023, with all of them having another 4 years to really do whatever they want to do, no consequences, they're likely to come after the cannabinoid sector again. And that means D8, that means THCO, it means HHC, it means CBD, CBG, it means all of the cannabinoids.
Well, and that brings up a question. So like I since I've been in the scene, the cannabis scene within Texas, and just by having the podcast, basically what I'm saying, since I launched in 2020, there has been an evolution in cannabinoids because of human ingenuity, right? Like loopholes. Like these operators have basically found a way, because there is an appetite for the THC compound, which has the psychoactive properties. That's the reason why D8 has come about and has become so popular. HHC, another one, right? So my question to you is how, like, that makes sense that they will go after these cannabinoids if they're reelected, but like how will they effectively do so? Because at least from my perspective, it seems like they're playing catch up, because once they ban one cannabinoid, another one pops out, another one emerges, right? So it's almost like this cat and mouse game.
Well, I think they're going to revisit the derivative side of the language of HB 1325. I think they'll attack it legislatively, of course, more likely in the Senate than they will in the House. We tend to get a lot of favorable support in the Texas House. It's typically in the Senate that you begin to see a lot of trickery and just amendments that get stuck on, trying to change up things. I will say that they are concerned a lot about the cannabinoid side. I think they're worried about how there's not really any regulation on minors consuming. They have a lot of positions that they are ready to come legislate on this. I think that there's going to be a lot of push on the medical front to really expand teacup out, eliminate the THC threshold at 1%, and open that up to vapes and smokables, hopefully. But like I said, if history tells us anything, if the same cast of characters come back, then it's probably incremental changes, and it's going to be a lot of deal making and negotiation that, if we want to move forward, we may have to take a step back. I'm really interested to see, because if we do get a change at the executive somewhere, whether it's Rochelle Garza upsetting Ken Paxton or Beto O'Rourke or Mike Collier, if there's a change there, it might cause some chaos in the legislature, like some severe chaos. And I'm kind of here for that.
If the same cast of characters are willing to go as far as to hurt Texas farmers, right, then yeah, there's no telling what chaos will ensue if, like you said, they are not reelected and someone else is in that position.
And I hate to say it, but Texas Republicans have every opportunity to own this issue. I mean, in my opinion, it is a far more conservative issio than anything else.
100%. Yeah.
They should be owning this, right? Like they should be sweeping this. Governor Abbott should be coming out every bit as much as Beto O'Rourke is coming out saying he wants to legalize marijuana. Governor Abbott should be coming out and saying these same exact things. In fact, the one issue that we do have, the one case where we do have this, where both sides really do strongly support cannabis, is at the ag race, right? So Susan Hayes, who's a big time cannabis lawyer here in the state, is running as a Democrat for Texas Ag Commissioner. But we also have incumbent Sid Miller, who's been a proud champion of cannabis, and as recently as several weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago, came out with a public headline saying that, prohibition was wrong. It was racist. We should just completely open this up for medical expansion, that, everything he had ever been taught about cannabis was wrong. And so, this is really what it should be in every race. We should have two different candidates who really you should be voting on them based on who loves it more, right?
I totally agree. I mean, it's an American story at the end of the day. Job creation, environmental benefits, right? I mean, the medicinal properties, not to mention the opportunity that Texas has in terms of industrial hemp. Like, imagine the infrastructure in place to actually produce material goods, plastics for cars, hempcrete for houses. I mean, that's really where Texas could shine. But these elected officials, these same cast of characters, as you put it, they're too short-sighted to see that because they can't get out of their own way and their own preconceived notion of what they thought this plant was and what we've been told, which, just like Sid Miller, he had enough, what's the word? He just understood that those were lies, and he put his ego out of it, and he saw that there's an opportunity here, and it actually benefits a lot of people. So basically what Austin's saying for those listening and watching, that if these same cast of characters come in, it's going to be bad. So vote them out at the ballot box come November.
Politics is always very unpredictable. And so there is a scenario that plays out where even if we do vote these guys out, that the politics will be so
ugly.
Ugly. Yeah, that's the best way I can put it. They will be so ugly that nothing gets done. Right. So it's almost as if, do we want incremental change or do we want nothing? Because that could likely play out. It really just depends on how things work out. If there's a big upset at the ballot box, then we're prepared to work with that. If there is, like I said, if it's status quo, if the same results that happened in 2018 happen again in 2022, then we'll be prepared. I don't want people to have the misconception that, we're only like a year away from legalizing cannabis. It doesn't matter really who gets elected. I think we're a little bit further than just 1 year away. So understand that in Texas, politics move slow, things move slow, and nothing in Texas gets done without backbreaking work. Right. That's just the way of Texas. So I would advise everybody, taper your expectations, but don't stop fighting. Don't stop. Like you said, keep showing up, keep getting involved, because you never know what audience you can hold and whose lives you can change, to be honest with you.
It's well said, Austin. Well, hey, as we wrap up, I want to leave the floor with you, man. Is there anything that you want to, share with the audience that's top of mind?
Really, if you can, go follow us. You can find our handle on Instagram at TX Cannabis Collective. You can go visit our website at txcannabicode.com. And you find us on just about all the socials. We have a really popular podcast as well, Lone Star Collective. Sorry, I know this is a podcast, but
no, plug it, man. Jesse Williams, right? You got like 40 episodes or so. Tell us about it. Yeah.
Almost 50 episodes deep. We've interviewed DAs, rock stars. Hopefully we can. We've interviewed a lot of people running for office. Other cannabis people in the space here in Texas. So in fact, Chris Grisolia is on the podcast now. Jesse Williams, I'm on there intermittently. We really try to work to get some exclusive access to people that most people otherwise wouldn't have. So
absolutely, yeah. Hey, podcasters help podcasters, man, and and I agree with Austin 100%. Texas Cannabis Collective is a really good channel to follow, whatever social media channel that you like to be on. Really good stuff in terms of what's actually happening in this state, along with the podcast. I've listened to a few episodes and it's great stuff. So you guys keep up the great work. I'll be sure to put those links in the description box and on YouTube for if anybody wants to look and follow those. But Austin, really, man, thanks again for your insights and for all your work in terms of showing up as a cannabis advocate and producing that activism, man. So just keep it up, keep blazing the trails, and let's have you on very soon, and we can talk about, how there's good change happening in the state of Texas as it relates to cannabis.
Yeah, let's talk after the elections, huh?
Let's do it, man. Let's do it. Yeah,
We'll
either way.
I'll have a lot more definitive answers, I think.
Exactly. We'll have something to talk about. Cool, man. Well, thanks again, and thank you all for listening. Bye.
Bye.